The burlap sack trembled in her arms like something alive. Thomas Garrett had seen enough broken souls drift through Copper Ridge to recognize the look, that hollow stare of someone carrying weight no person should bear. But this woman, standing in his doorway with rain dripping from her torn shawl, held something different in her eyes. Terror so pure it made his chest tighten. "Please," she whispered, clutching the sack closer. "Don't look inside." 3 hours earlier, Thomas had been splitting firewood behind his modest cabin when the storm rolled in from the eastern mountains. Lightning split the sky like God's own judgment, and thunder shook the windows in their frames. He'd barely secured his tools when her silhouette appeared through the curtain of rain, a slight figure stumbling down the muddy trail that led nowhere good. Now she stood shivering on his threshold, soaked to the bone, dark hair plastered against a face that might have been beautiful once. Before whatever happened. Before whatever she carried in that sack that made her shoulders shake with more than just cold. "Come in from the rain," Thomas said, stepping aside. "Whatever it is, we'll sort it." She hesitated, eyes darting past him into the warm glow of his cabin. "You don't understand. If anyone finds out what I'm carrying, nobody's going to find anything in this storm." The woman stepped inside, water pooling at her feet on the rough-hewn floorboards. She clutched the sack like a lifeline, knuckles white against the coarse fabric. Thomas noticed her hands, delicate, unmarked by hard labor. A lady, then? Or had been. "What's your name?" he asked, moving to stoke the fire. "Mary." The word came out cracked, like she'd forgotten how to say it. "Mary Whitmore." Thomas froze, poker halfway to the flames. Every man in 3 counties knew that name. Judge Whitmore's daughter, the one who'd disappeared 6 months ago on her wedding day. The one they'd found her bridegroom's blood but never found her. She saw the recognition in his face and clutched the sack tighter. "Please," she whispered again. "Whatever you think you know, don't look inside. Some things can't be undone once they're seen." But Thomas was already staring at the sack, watching how it seemed to pulse against her chest, and wondering what could make a dead woman's hands shake with such desperate, living fear. The sack moved. Thomas blinked hard, certain the firelight was playing tricks, but there it was again, a subtle shift, like something settling inside the burlap. Mary's breath caught, and she pressed it closer to her body, rocking slightly on her feet. "When did you last eat?" Thomas asked, though his eyes never left the mysterious bundle. "I don't remember." He moved to the kitchen area, pulling bread and dried meat from his stores. Simple movements, but his mind raced. Mary Whitmore, alive. The woman half the territory thought murdered, standing in his cabin with something that moved in her arms like. "Your husband," he said carefully. "Benjamin Crawford. They found his blood in the church." Mary's face went white as winter. "He's not my husband. Never was. The wedding, there was no wedding." Her voice turned sharp as broken glass. "There was only this." She looked down at the sack, and for a moment, her expression softened into something that might have been tenderness. Then the terror returned, stronger than before. Thomas set the food on his small table. Outside, the storm raged with biblical fury, but inside, the silence stretched like a held breath. He'd lived alone in these mountains for 5 years, keeping his own secrets, asking no questions of the broken souls who sometimes found their way to his door. But this. "Mary," he said quietly. "Whatever happened, whatever you're carrying, you're safe here." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Safe? Do you know what they do to women like me? What they'd do if they knew? I know what they say they do. Doesn't mean it's right." The sack shifted again, more pronounced this time, and Mary made a small sound in her throat, part gasp, part sob. She sank into the chair he offered, never releasing her burden. "You don't understand," she whispered. "If they find us, if anyone sees." Thomas knelt beside her chair, close enough to smell the rain in her hair, the deeper scent of fear and exhaustion. "Then we make sure no one sees." Mary's eyes snapped to his face, searching for deception, for the judgment she'd clearly grown accustomed to. Instead, she found only steady resolve. "You'd do that?" For someone you don't even know? I know enough. But even as he said it, Thomas wondered if he was making the biggest mistake of his life, or if some things were worth the risk regardless of consequence. The riders came at dawn. Thomas woke to the sound of hoofbeats on wet earth, multiple horses moving fast up the mountain trail. He rolled from his bed, grabbing his rifle, and glanced toward the corner where Mary had finally fallen asleep in the old rocking chair, the sack still cradled in her arms. Mary! He touched her shoulder gently. We've got company. Her eyes flew open, instantly alert with the wariness of someone who'd learned to sleep with one ear always listening for danger. The sack stirred against her chest, and she made that soft shushing sound again, rocking slightly. How many? She whispered. Thomas peered through the front window. 6 men, maybe 7, wearing the kind of hard faces that came with bounty work. He recognized the leader, Jake Morrison, a man who'd track his own mother for the right price. They're not here by accident, Thomas said. Mary's face crumpled. Someone saw me. Someone always sees. The riders spread out around the cabin with practiced efficiency. Morrison dismounted and approached the door, hand resting on his sidearm. His voice carried easily through the thin walls. Thomas Garrett! We know you're in there. We're looking for a woman. Mary Whitmore. There's a reward for her safe return. Safe return. Mary breathed, bitter as poison. They'll hang me before sunset. Thomas looked at her, this broken woman clutching her mysterious burden, and felt something crystallize in his chest. He'd spent 5 years hiding from his own past, his own mistakes. Maybe it was time to stop running. There's a root cellar, he said quietly. Behind the woodpile. Take the sack and hide there until they're gone. Thomas, no. You don't know what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing. Mary rose unsteadily, the sack seeming heavier now, more real. As she moved toward the back door, she paused. If something happens to me, if they take me. She looked down at her burden with such tender desperation it made Thomas's throat tight. Promise me you'll look inside. Promise me you'll understand. Before he could answer, Morrison's fist hammered against the door. Open up, Garrett! We know she's in there. Thomas watched Mary disappear into the gray morning, carrying her secret toward the hiding place. Then he walked to the door, rifle in hand, and wondered if some promises were worth dying for. The bullet splintered the doorframe 6 inches from Thomas's head. Next one won't be a warning, Morrison called out. Send her out, Garrett, and nobody else has to get hurt. Thomas crouched behind his overturned table, mind racing. Through the back window, he could see Mary's silhouette pressed against the woodpile, the sack held tight against her chest. She was trapped. The root cellar door lay 10 feet across open ground, and Morrison's men had the area covered. She's not here, Thomas shouted back. Horse tracks say different. Fresh ones, leading right to your door. Another shot, this one through the window. Glass showered across the floor, and Thomas heard Mary's sharp intake of breath from outside. The sack moved again, more urgently now, and Mary bent her head to whisper something so soft he couldn't make out the words. That's when he understood. The gentle way she held it. The protective curve of her body. The soft sounds she made, soothing and desperate. The way she'd asked him to look inside if something happened to her, not as a burden, but as a final act of trust. Mary, he called quietly. Howled! She met his eyes through the broken window, tears streaming down her face. 3 months, she whispered. Thomas closed his eyes, the full weight of it hitting him like a physical blow. Mary Whitmore disappeared on her wedding day. Found 6 months later, alive, carrying the one thing that would damn her in the eyes of every God-fearing citizen in the territory. An unmarried woman with a child, evidence of sin so profound that mercy wasn't even a consideration. The father? He asked, though he already knew the answer would break something inside him. Dead, she said simply. I made sure of that. Benjamin Crawford's blood in the church. Not a murder, but justice. And now she carried the consequence of whatever violence had been done to her, protecting the innocent result with her own life. Morrison's voice cut through the morning air. We're coming in, Garrett. Count of 10. Thomas looked at Mary, this woman who'd killed to protect herself and her child, who'd lived like an animal in the wilderness rather than face the judgment of men who'd never known real courage. 1. He made his choice. Mary, when I step out that door, you run for the cellar. Don't stop, don't look back. 2. Thomas, they'll kill you. 3. Some things are worth dying for, he said, and meant it. 4. The sack stirred again, and Mary pressed her lips to the burlap, whispering something that sounded like a prayer. Thomas stepped into the morning light with his hands raised. Morrison's men had their guns trained on him, fingers tense on triggers, but Thomas only had eyes for the woman slipping into the root cellar behind them. The wooden door closed with the softest whisper, and Mary Whitmore vanished like morning mist. Where is she? Morrison demanded. Gone. Thomas's voice carried the calm of a man who'd made peace with his choices. Headed north an hour ago. You're lying. Check the tracks yourself. She was here, but she didn't stay. Morrison studied Thomas's face, looking for deception, for the telltale signs of a man protecting something precious. Instead, he found only steady resolve and the kind of quiet strength that made lesser men uncomfortable. For 20 minutes they searched. Tore through his cabin, scattered his belongings, checked every hiding place they could imagine. But they never thought to look in the root cellar, never considered that a man would risk his life for a stranger's secret. When they finally rode away, cursing and empty-handed, Thomas waited another hour before approaching the woodpile. Mary? They're gone. The cellar door creaked open, and she emerged like something reborn, blinking in the afternoon sunlight. The sack in her arms had settled into stillness, and her face held a peace he hadn't seen before. Why? She asked simply. Thomas looked at her, this fierce woman who'd killed to protect innocence, who'd lived as an outcast rather than abandon the child that proved her shame, and found his answer in the gentle way she held her burden. Because some things matter more than law, he said. Some things matter more than what people think. Mary's eyes filled with tears, but for the first time, they weren't tears of fear. I can't stay, she whispered. It's not safe for anyone. I know. She reached into the sack and drew out a tiny hand, perfect fingers curled in sleep. For just a moment, she let Thomas see the face that had cost her everything and given her everything in return. His name is Samuel, she said. I wanted someone to know his name. As the sun touched the western mountains, Mary Whitmore walked back into the wilderness, carrying her secret toward whatever sanctuary she could find. Thomas watched until she disappeared among the trees, then turned back to his cabin. On his table lay a small carved wooden horse, a child's toy, whittled with loving hands during long nights on the run. He picked it up, feeling its weight, and understood that some forms of love were worth any price.